All right, welcome back to our deep dive into Stefan Schultz's integral journalism model. Today, we're jumping into the very first of his 5 principles, richness of perspectives.
So Schultz kicks things off by painting this picture of our modern media landscape, what he calls Info City. And let's just say it's a place in turmoil. You've got populists and propaganda bots sowing division, and the traditional guardians of information, journalists, are really struggling to keep up. And in a situation this chaotic, he argues it's time for a new kind of hero, right? We need a whole new set of journalistic superpowers, ones that can protect the very space that makes our free, democratic society possible.
Now, just as a quick refresher, each of these 5 integral journalism principles is really like a 4-in-1 package. It's a toolbox packed with practical methods, it's a key developmental push for society, it's a journalistic superpower, and finally, it offers a whole new professional identity for journalists looking to expand their role.
So, are you ready to meet the first hero who really embodies this principle? Okay, let's do this. He is the absolute master of finding and weaving together the richest perspectives you can imagine. In his civilian life, if you will, his name is Tariq Karim. He's this brilliant thinker and system specialist who grew up totally surrounded by different cultures and ideologies. But in Info City, he's known as Perspectivekis. His superpower is his total dedication to dialectic and synthesis. I mean, this guy can flip from the tiniest details to the biggest picture in a heartbeat, and he stays perfectly clear even when things get insanely complex. He's the one who sees the connections that pretty much everyone else misses. So, according to Schultz's model, Perspectivekis teaches us that to achieve a true richness of perspective, a journalist has to master 4 distinct but totally related powers. The first power is all about perception. It's about learning to see what others overlook and moving beyond the obvious, default narratives that we all kind of fall into. This means we have to actively hunt down 2 kinds of hidden views. First, you've got the fleeting perspectives, the subtle or systemic forces we miss when our brain is on autopilot, what Daniel Kahneman calls fast thinking. And second, there are the delicate perspectives, those ideas that exist outside the current Overton window of acceptable public debate, the stuff we often avoid because of social pressure. Now, the biggest threat to exploring those delicate perspectives is something called an equivalence chain. This is basically a rhetorical trap that lumps different, often totally unrelated ideas together to create a simplified enemy. It forces everyone into an us versus them corner and just shuts down any real, nuanced discussion. So how do we break these chains? Well, Perspectivekis gives us a toolkit. First, be super precise with your language to avoid being misunderstood. Second, back up your claims with evidence. Also, you have to proactively draw clear lines between legitimate questions and absurd theories. And finally, use neutral terms instead of emotionally loaded ones. All right, on to the second power. This one is all about finding truth, not in simple answers, but in the messy gray areas, the paradoxes, and the contradictions that make up our complex world. So, instead of trying to force every story into a simple, clean narrative, this power is about embracing ambiguity. Schultz describes ambiguity as a space of possibility. It's the zone where real learning happens, precisely because our existing mental maps of the world are just too coarse to make sense of it. But, embracing all these different views brings up a huge question, and it leads us right to the third power. How do we avoid that classic journalistic trap of false balance, giving way too much weight to ideas that are baseless or even actively harmful? The answer, and our third power, is careful weighting. It's not about balancing all views equally. It's about weighing each perspective against higher-order principles, like universal human rights or a deep commitment to serving society's best interests. This ethical framework is what helps us sort through all the noise. And this brings us to the fourth and final power in the arsenal of Perspectivekis, the power of synthesis. This goes way beyond just collecting viewpoints. It's about creating something new and more complete from them. So instead of getting stuck in those endless for or against debates, we can use a tool like the polarity map. Take 2 opposing but equally valid values, like being generous and being thrifty. Both are good, right? But if you push them to an extreme, generosity becomes wastefulness and thriftiness turns into miserliness. The real power of synthesis lies in weaving the best parts of both poles together.
The goal isn't to choose one over the other, but to find a way to be both generous and thrifty, to maximize the positives of both sides while actively avoiding the negative extremes. And hey, that sounds a lot like what Schultz is doing in his own model, doesn't it? He's blending the best parts of different journalistic traditions to create something stronger. Funny how that works.
Look, we've really only been able to scratch the surface of these complex ideas here. If you want to expand your own journalistic work with these tools, I highly recommend checking out Stefan's coaching and workshops. You can find more info at the website on your screen.
So, to recap, that was the first integral journalism principle. It's embodied by Perspectivicus, and it's all about looking outward, gathering all those perspectives from the world around us. But what happens when the biggest, most complicated story you have to deconstruct is your own? What if the first step to seeing the world clearly is unmasking your own biases? Well, there's a hero with a superpower for exactly that. Be sure to tune in for our next explainer where we'll meet hero number 2.